leaders failed to agree to utilize frozen Russian state assets as part of a reparations loan for Ukraine.
The Court of Justice of the EU ruled that Poland's constitutional tribunal was not independent and impartial because of politicized appointments.
The suspect in the mass shooting at Brown University, as well as the killing of an MIT professor, was found dead in a storage unit.
EU leaders failed to agree to utilise frozen Russian state assets as part of a reparations loan for Ukraine. At an EU summit in Brussels, 24 member states agreed to common borrowing of up to €90 billion to ensure Ukraine is funded through next year and 2027. The vast majority of the Russian state assets are held in Euroclear Financial Repository in Belgium. The Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever insisted on unlimited guarantees in case of any successful legal action by Russia, something EU leaders could not agree to. As reported exclusively by Euronews, 3 countries, Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, refused to participate in the support for Ukraine. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said there are forces in the EU as well as outside the EU that are trying to divide Europe.
Ensuring another country €90 billion for the next 2 years, I don't think it has ever been seen before in our history, so it's quite something to achieve. And as you know, I mean, there are a lot of people outside the European Union and unfortunately also inside the European Union who tries to divide us.
The EU insists it succeeded by permanently immobilising €210 billion of Russian state assets. Meanwhile, a much-anticipated vote of the Mercosur Latin American trade deal was also delayed at the summit. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said she needed 3 more weeks to communicate new safeguard mechanisms designed to protect the agricultural sector. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the deal will be done eventually.
I'm confident that we have the sufficient majority. There is still, as I said, work to do with member states. Therefore, we needed a slight postponement. But, I mean, my friend Antonio Costa has said it already. After 26 years of negotiations, a delay of 3 weeks, I think, is tolerable. It's amazing that we are moving towards the conclusion of this so important trade agreement. And I'm very confident that we'll bring it home.
In a week where Europe declared it would take matters into its own hands when it came to forcing Russia to pay for the war it's waging in Ukraine, the EU balked at the last minute. EU leaders can at least point to the fact that Ukraine will be funded for the next 2 years, but at what cost to Europe's credibility? Shona Murray, Euronews, Brussels.
Responding to a question from Euronews at the European Council summit in Brussels, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Europe's commitment to assist Ukraine in case of a future Russian attack cannot replace US security guarantees. Zelensky made the comment after European leaders vowed to protect Ukraine from Russia in the future, including by military means, at a meeting in Berlin on Monday.
Mr. President, the question is a follow-up also on the Berlin meeting. I would like to know how would you assess the progress in the diplomatic side of trying to find a settlement to end Russia's war in Ukraine, and if you also plan anytime soon the meeting with Donald Trump, and whether you think that the commitments that were voiced by the European leaders could actually replace Article 5 and NATO accession. Thank you.
Ми не вважаємо, що Європа повинна замінити Сполучені Штати Америки. І, безумовно, так само ставимось до гарантій безпеки Сполучених Штатів Америки, що буде Article 5-like, і нам не знадобиться європейська підтримка. Це різні речі. І як би Росія, які б сигнали не передавала, а ми їх розуміємо, що вони хотіли би виключити присутність європейців. Це не можна робити цього. Це різні речі. Це не значить, що Європа, якщо буде агресія знову Росії, що Європа зможе своєю присутністю так воювати з... Ніхто не каже про це. Присутність Європи зменшує шанси і відсоток агресії Російської Федерації.
Thousands of farmers have travelled to Brussels on Thursday to protest against the EU-Mercosur agreement, a contentious trade pact with South America. While EU leaders gathered for a major summit nearby, farmers blocked roads with tractors, threw potatoes and set off fireworks. Supporters of the deal say it would unlock new markets vital to the EU economy, but critics fear it would weaken environmental regulations and damage the agricultural sector.
Nous, ce qu'on demande, c'est de vivre de notre travail et surtout être contre le Mercosur parce que, bon, si on importe de la viande, des produits des pays étrangers que eux, ils ne respectent pas les mêmes normes que nous, ce n'est pas normal. Et nous, on a beaucoup de normes à respecter, eux, ils n'en ont pas à respecter et on importe quand même des produits de pays étrangers qui ne respectent aucune norme.
Under the accord, tariffs on nearly all goods traded between the EU and the Mercosur nations would be eliminated over a 15-year period. At the summit, the leaders of 27 EU member states are set to decide whether to endorse or postpone the trade deal for further amendments. French President Emmanuel Macron maintains his opposition and called for more negotiations in January. Macron said he had discussed delaying the agreement with counterparts from Italy, Poland, Belgium, Austria and Ireland.
On Wednesday, the EU Council and Parliament agreed on a set of safeguard measures to protect the farmers. The agreement now needs the backing of member states, but some countries like France think this is too premature and have asked to delay the vote. Brazil has now issued an ultimatum and has given EU leaders until Saturday to sign the agreement. Evelyn Dom in Brussels for Euronews.
The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled on Thursday that Poland's constitutional tribunal was not independent and impartial because of politicized appointments made under the previous conservative government. Talking to the media on the sidelines of the European Council summit in Brussels, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said the ruling finally gives a green light to repair the tribunal.
Z punktu widzenia on nie może działać, on w ogóle nie funkcjonuje. I ten werdykt, to orzeczenie Trybunału Sprawiedliwości Unii Europejskiej potwierdza tylko, ale to potwierdzenie, to co wiedzieliśmy i co mówiliśmy, ale to potwierdzenie ma też istotne znaczenie praktyczne. Wydaje się, że od tego momentu będziemy mogli starać się naprawiać Trybunał Konstytucyjny poprzez uzupełnianie systematyczne składu.
Between 2025 and 2023, Poland's former ruling Law and Justice Party drastically transformed the justice system, including establishing political control over top courts. In theory, such a ruling by the top EU court should trigger national reforms to restore the independence of the Polish Constitutional Tribunal, a requirement for the country to be in the EU.
The European Central Bank kept its key deposit rate unchanged at 2% on Thursday for a fourth straight meeting, with the Eurozone thus far managing to handle US tariffs more effectively than expected. The ECB also held its main refinancing rate at 2.15% and its marginal lending facility at 2.40%. The bank upgraded its growth outlook again, forecasting Eurozone output at 1.4% in 2025, up from 1.2%. It now expects 1.2% growth in 2026, 1.4% in 2027, and 1.4% in 2028. Inflation was 2.1% in November and is forecast to average 2.1% in 2025 before easing to 1.9% in 2026. ECB President Christine Lagarde said the Eurozone is close to potential but needs stronger productivity. Some analysts are now discussing a possible rate hike in 2026 after ECB Executive Board member Isabel Schnabel warned that inflation risks may be rising.
Bypassing the treaty and not.
The man suspected in a mass shooting at Brown University, as well as the killing of an MIT professor, has been found dead, officials said. The suspect was found in a storage facility in New Hampshire, where he rented a unit. He had a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators believe the suspect acted alone.
The community stepped up. It was all about groundwork, public assistance, interviews of individuals, and good old-fashioned policing. We looked at financial records, we looked at video footages, and in the specific incident, it was actually a video that provided us with a description of a vehicle.
2 people were killed and 9 were wounded in a mass shooting last week during final exams at Brown University in Rhode Island. Police briefly detained a person of interest who was then released due to lack of evidence. The investigation then took a turn when authorities said they were looking for a connection between the shooting and the fatal attack on an MIT professor near Boston.
The U.S. military said 4 people were killed after it attacked another boat accused of smuggling drugs in the eastern Pacific Ocean. Trump has justified the attacks as a necessary escalation to combat drug trafficking and asserted the U.S. is engaged in an armed conflict with drug cartels. Tensions have risen with Venezuela as Trump expressed willingness to conduct strikes on land and ordered a blockade this week on sanctioned oil vessels coming into and out of Venezuela. Trump vowed to continue the military buildup until the country gave the U.S. oil, land, and assets, though it was not clear why he felt the U.S. had a claim.
Getting land, oil rights, whatever we had, they took it away because we had a president that maybe wasn't watching. But they're not going to do that. We want it back. They took our oil rights. We had a lot of oil there. As you know, they threw our companies out, and we want it back.
The Trump administration is facing increasing scrutiny from congressional Democrats over the boat strike campaign. House Republicans rejected Democratic-backed resolutions on Wednesday that would have forced the government to seek authorization from Congress before continuing its attacks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended the campaign as a successful counter-narcotic effort, but did not inform Congress about its ultimate goals when it comes to Venezuela.